was on the property of Caldwell Systems. And since there's no law against killing trees in the state of North Carolina, there is nothing anybody can do. In 1985, I began to suspect that the damage to the vegetation was not on company property. So I began to pursue, whose property is this really? Who is being inundated by the stuff from this facility? I was told to keep out, of course. This is by the air quality people. In 1986, I found out that the property belonged to a dairy farmer. I'd never been to the dairy farmer's house. Matter of fact, I generally don't go to facilities. That's to the companies. I usually start at the fence line, move around like, there's a newspaper article once said here, like Rambo through the woods. I don't like to deal with the facilities because it may prejudice my thoughts. I go out and I talk to the trees. It may sound a little strange, but they can tell me the truth, whereas a lot of people might not. All I wanted to do was to take the information to air quality and say, look, here's damage. Let's get some monitors out there. Let's go find out what this facility is putting out. My requests were denied. Not once, not twice, many, many times. Now we're talking about Caldwell County right here. I was fortunate. I'm one state biologist, the only state biologist. I had 100 counties in the state of North Carolina. I've got over 100 problems. None as severe as Caldwell, but all of them just as real. The information of Caldwell County was taken to one of my mentors when I was in school, a world-renowned Dr. Walter Heck. He is with the United States Department of Agriculture. He took one look at the photographs and he said, my God, what in the world is going on? Just the photographs. There was sufficient evidence to investigate the facility. I pleaded. I even did a little cussing. Shame on me. And I was told by the then chief of air quality that if I brought in a problem, a stack of problems, a foot tall, he could not get to them for a year. This was in 1988. At that time, I had discovered that the potential for phosgene, which was a gas used in the First World War as anti-personnel gas, was being emitted from the facility. Now, I have no proof that that material was being emitted, but the potential was there. People, human beings like you, could be hurt and hurt very seriously from this material. This is why we used it, and the Germans and the French and the English used it in the First World War as an anti-personnel gas. I must agree with a state employee, Mr. Bill Meyer. Mr. Meyer states right here, and I'll read this to you. Let me ask you this, and this is all in quotes now. Let me ask you this, and I'll be blunt, Meyer says. How much evidence do you need when the smoke is coming out so thick you can pick it with a pitchfork? I took photographs of that smoke for a time frame far longer than the state permitting laws, legalities allow. And nothing was done. The state of North Carolina has laws against emitting particulate matter, and that's what smoke is. But there was nothing done. If any of you have seen the Independent of a few months ago, or it was back around Earth Day, this photograph was in there. That's the infamous photograph right there of the smoke. Now this smoke lands on the vegetation, lands on the soil, lands on the people, lands on the houses. You inhale it, and this smoke is what contains a lot of toxins. The TCDD that Dr. Guerra spoke of, the more common name of that is dioxin. I'm sure that you've heard of dioxin. This is a material that the Vietnam boys got. It's a byproduct. It's normally found in many pesticides, or some pesticides, and herbicides. It can also be manufactured in incomplete combustion with carbonaceous material and organic material. These things were emitted into the air, but I have very scant proof that they were emitted. In 1987, I managed to get 2 students from Western Carolina. These were rising juniors. These young ladies were very mature, very able, very knowledgeable, and wanted to learn about what happens in their environment. They both lived in that area. So I took the students on and said, now here is a plan of action that we will follow. We set out passive collector systems, 6 in number. We were supposed to set out 60. 2 weeks after we started with the investigations, the students were taken away from me. I became their academic advisor. Their supervisor was in the regional office in Mooresville. The reason given, why they could not allow 2 young ladies without a direct supervisor coming into the office every day in shorts. Needless to say, I did a little cussing again. I'm prone to that. I conducted some analysis. Well, I took the samples. I'm not that good to do the analysis. I took the analysis to the North Carolina Department of Agriculture Plant Tissue Lab. Maybe some of you folks have done a little work down there. Send something off to Dr. Ray Tucker. I asked Ray, I said, would you do me a favor here and run some of this tissue for me? Tell me what the background is. In every sample that I sent him, I found the limit for vegetation, which is 20% above background. When you achieve 20% above background, you have damage. Every sample that I sent him was loaded with chloride. Now the chloride could have gotten there either as hydrogen chloride, hydrochloric acid, or possibly as phosgene. I don't know. The damage both looks the same, because when phosgene makes contact with water, it forms hydrochloric acid. Mark spoke of the model that was run. What was interesting about the model, in 1987 the experiment was done only with the 6 containers now. In 1988, it was 1988, I managed to get the data back and everything. I went to my supervisor and said, I would like to take this data and have a model run on it. No. Okay, so I just sat on the data. January 1989, I was shut down. The bio unit was shut down. I was put behind a desk. I'm probably the highest paid data entry clerk in the state of North Carolina right now. It's really a new career for me. When nobody was looking, as I often have done in the past, I kind of crept into a friend's office and said, Jim, could you do this for me? Well, sure, Roy, what do you need done? How about taking and running this? Let's take, like the state does, we'll take the second highest concentration. We'll take the furthest point, and we'll just run them. Make some assumptions and just run the model. Now, I will tell you right now, we made assumptions, and we all know what that means. I found 36 pounds an hour on the average. Now, the model is good within a factor of 2. So you would take that 36 and divide it by 2, which would give you 18. Remembering, of course, that the facility was allowed 4 pounds an hour. Or you would multiply that 36 by 2. Still, the facility is allowed 4 pounds an hour. The news that I had managed to swallow the data upset some folks, mainly in air quality. Everybody scurried around now to prove me wrong. they managed to run other models, making some other assumptions, and they came up with concentrations of 1 at a minimum to 80, which kind of tickled me, because all I said was 36. The point I'm making is nothing was done. I pleaded. I tried to be human. I tried to be a kind individual. That's kind of hard for me. When I know that some of my fellow men, God's creations, are being injured for life, that saddens me. I did not go into medicine because I don't like the sight of blood, especially my own or my fellow man. So I went into plants. They don't scream. They don't tell you when they ache. They don't cough. They just kind of sit there in a pot or sit there in the environment. But if you look real close at them, they'll tell you what's going on in that environment. All I wanted was bring in the experts, because I'm not an expert at all the modeling or the monitoring or the chemistry. But I'm afraid my requests and requests of other folks fell on deaf ears. I have approximately 30 days until I'm old enough to retire. Believe it or not, I'm going to take early retirement. But I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to get started.
I heard somebody in the front row ask a question. I'm going to repeat it. Were your reports ever changed?
Yes, they were changed.
By who?
The past chief of air quality, who is now with EPA, so he can do things on a much broader scale, and the present chief of air quality, so he too can do things on a much broader scale.
Why?
Well, Mark, we can't have the truth coming out.
We can try.
Well, now we can try. The present chief of air quality told me, what was it, about a month ago, that I had missed the whole point of air quality. And I started to ask him, well, what was the point? But I decided that my ears were already tired. I didn't want to hear anymore. I don't know what the point of air quality is. I've been told that I'm doing a very important job right now. I'm getting money from EPA. I tell you, all that time in college just to use those two fingers. Whew.
I'm not done with you yet. Okay. We mentioned that Caldwell County is suing the state and the state regulatory agencies for not doing their job. Is it true that Caldwell County deposed you on their behalf?
Yes, sir, they did.
What did you say that upset them?
That in my opinion, and once again, this is my personal opinion here now, I'm not representing anybody but myself, that the Division of Environmental Management Air Quality Section did not do their job. And they were very upset that I had said that.
Roy, what was the date of that deposition?
July 1988.
When was the bio unit closed?
January 1989.
Why?
Well, I've been told a range of things. One was the budgetary crunch that we're under right now in state government. These guys have got real good crystal balls. They could see that one coming back in January of '89. I'd like to have them tell me about the stock market. Another one was I had gone out on a limb that the division was not willing to go out on. So they want to cut the limb off behind me. That's all right. I got a parachute on. I'll float down. Another one was I had bad science, poor science. Well, I'll admit now that the dust fall bucket was not the best in the world. It's like taking a shotgun going after a housefly. All I did was something. It may not have been perfect, but it was something. I couldn't stand to sit on my hands anymore.
Is there anything else that the state did to you?
Oh, yes. You folks know you don't need to get up and run now. They sent me to a psychiatrist. Yes. And not knowing the one that they sent me to, I decided that maybe I'd best find one on my own. Funny thing, they both said, "Why don't you send us your supervisors, Roy?" Well, it's not in my power. One comment I'd like to make about the psychiatrist, some of the finest people that I've admired my whole life have had psychiatrists. And I didn't know that until just a few years ago. Well, in fact, it was last year when one of the psychiatrists told me that John Wayne had a psychiatrist, Clint Eastwood has a psychiatrist. My golly, Ned, I'm getting in good company, I swear.
Thanks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We hope we helped.
Thought I was done, but I've only just begun. Okay, what are the results of some of these exposures that Roy has described? Let me read to you verbatim from some Duke reports. Mrs. H has reactive airway dysfunction syndrome as a direct consequence of exposures to chlorine emissions from CSI. Mr. R has reactive airway dysfunction syndrome as a direct result of exposures to chlorine emissions from CSI. Mrs. M has reactive airway dysfunction syndrome as a direct consequence of exposures to chlorine-containing emissions from CSI. William, a 4-year-old male, has persistent airway reactivity from exposure to irritant fumes, and when his parents moved near CSI and resolved once the incinerator stopped burning. Unfortunately, he had a recurrence in September of 1989 associated with fire at the facility, suggesting persistent airway reactivity and unusual susceptibility to future exposures. Lawrence has bronchiolitis obliterans of organizing pneumonia. His lung condition is consistent with exposure to irritating gases such as phosgene. Unfortunately, Lawrence's pulmonary condition continues to deteriorate. His interstitial fibrosis continues to progress, precipitating frequent intense hospitalizations. The state no longer has the capability of monitoring the effect of industrial emissions on the environment. Ironically, the environmental bio unit headed by Mr. Gorman was closed shortly after he testified in deposition about CSI and their emissions and their environmental impact in Caldwell County. We know that exposures have taken place in Caldwell County and that people have short-term exposure-related illnesses. The question that I've asked time and time again is, what do the